Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, come on in here and sit down with me. Let's open our Bibles up. This week and next, we're going to study Psalm 132. Psalm 132 is the 13th step in the Ascent Psalms. So we're making our way up to Jerusalem, or we're walking up those steps in the temple, and we are praising the Lord all the way. And this is a great praise. There's a whole lot of history here in this psalm, so get your Bibles ready because we're going to heat them up this week, looking at all the different places where this psalm actually applies to the life of David and to the subject of the psalm, which is God's great care of his people. Now, today we're going to look at verses 1 and 2, and we're going to do this week the first half of Psalm 132. So we're just going to read up through verse 9, and then next week we will take up verses 10 through 18. So this psalm divides in half nicely, sort of, because the sections don't line up quite that nicely, but we'll do our best as we go through. This psalm is divided into two parts. We have request at the beginning. We have David's confession, and then that's in the first half of the psalm, and then in the second half of the psalm we have the Lord's promise, and the Lord himself speaks in verses 11 through 18. So we have that, and then at the end we have more request that's given there. So there's a lot in here. This psalm tells us about the tabernacle and the temple and the Lord's promise to David of Messiah. And so we're going to look at all of those things as we move along through this psalm. So let me read for you, beginning here in verse 1, and we're going to read today verses 1 and 2. So verse 1, Lord, remember David and all his afflictions, how he sware unto the Lord and vowed unto the mighty God of Jacob. All right, so we have a request, but this isn't a request for the Lord to remember David who's still alive, because David's probably gone by this time. This may have been written by Solomon or someone later, maybe Solomon when he finished the temple. But this psalm, when it opens with Lord, remember David, is not asking the Lord to remember him because he's currently under affliction, but to remember all his good work, everything that he had done, even while in affliction. Remember David and all his afflictions. So he was afflicted quite a bit, and we know, as we've studied David, and as we've read through the Psalms, we've seen so many of David's afflictions come across in his poetry in the Psalms. And so when we come to verse 2, it says, and how he sware unto the Lord and vowed unto the mighty God of Jacob. So not only did he do good works, but he made a promise. He swore an oath to the Lord. And in that oath, we have, we're going to see what we have beginning there in verse 3, so we'll do that tomorrow. But the oath is a good one. He sware unto the Lord. Now, if you go over to, verse 11, you're going to find that the Lord swore an oath to David. So the Lord swore by himself. David swears upon the Lord. He swears unto the Lord. And then here in verse 2, and then tomorrow we'll see, or next week actually, we'll see how the Lord swears to David and makes a promise which isn't temporary, but a promise which is eternal. Now we have here in verse 2, he sware unto the Lord and vowed unto the mighty God of Jacob. So we know exactly who it is that he's making this promise to. We know exactly who David intends here. And so as Solomon, whoever wrote this, begins, remember David in all his afflictions, we want to remember all his good works. And then he points out in verse 2, the good work that he did, which was to bring, and I'm going to tell you the story before we get there, to bring the ark up into Jerusalem and to prepare for the eventual temple of the Lord there in the city. So this song of degrees begins with remember David, that is, remember all his good works, but specifically remember this oath that he made. He vowed unto the mighty God of Jacob. All right, well, join me again tomorrow, and we'll dive into verses 3 and 4 here on Daily Dose Radio.